Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Madletter and today we'll be continuing the Deserts of Kharak lore series. Today we'll be finishing up the lore series entries about the actual Kiithid of Kharak. We start with the Siddim. The Siddim have always been a major voice in deciding the direction of all of Kharak. They often, especially in the Heresy Wars, tried to go for complete domination, but whenever that domination meant the destruction of their entire Kiithid, they would stop and step back. During the Heresy Wars, the Siddim were the largest proponents of the Fall from Grace faction, whom believed the people of Kharak had been exiled from heaven due to offending Seljuk, their god. Their greatest enemy, Kith thought the very idea as an affront. To believe our people capable of vexing a god was arrogance beyond understanding and the essence of heresy. In modern times, people see that the Galcian and Siddim were engaged in centuries of madness and war not to decide if Kharakians are cursed people, but how that curse was carried out. Up until the emergence of Kith the Heresy Wars continued unabated, with the senseless destruction and murder of many people. Following the emergence of the Kiithid and the voice of the Kharakian people demanding an end to warfare, the religious Kiithid reacted differently. Kith Sontar returned to the earth, following the call to strengthen Kharak from its roots. Kith retreated deeper into dogma and became outcast. The Siddim found a third way: rejoin normal society as quietly and progressively as possible, make the right renunciations and quietly pay the reparations. By the early 800s, the Siddim were back to being a major player in Kiithid politics and the new Diamid. Over the last 3 centuries, the Siddim have presented a viewpoint of adapting to new challenges by looking at past lessons. For instance, while the Siddim often opposed loosening laws that keep a family branch bound to their kith, they would make new laws that satisfied the desire for sideways mobility within Kharakian society, but only insofar as absolutely needed, and still with a very conservative bend. Siddim have always been a cornerstone of the coalition military, and never skimmed on contributions in personnel or material for various campaigns against Galcian raiders. They have been instrumental in developing the state-of-the-art crawler forces currently in use. In recent years, there have been a few charges brought against the Siddim in front of the Diamid, due to some of their warriors being guilty of excessive force against the Galcian. The Siddim has answered these charges by stating the most well-known cases to be isolated incidents of war stress, not representative of any kind of official policy. Stories like this one show that the past still clings to the Siddim, even though they have invested much into the coalition. Kith Hraal. Kith Hraal is a Kiithid whose philosophy straddles the boundaries between innovation and blasphemy. They were born out of the chaos at the end of the Heresy Wars. Caught between Galcian aggression and Siddim pogroms, many Kiithid were shattered and had no choice but to seek shelter with the aggressors. Among those were 5 of shattered Kith, standing outside the fortress of Tyr following the end of the Heresy Wars. Together they talked and decided that the old traditions had failed them utterly, and that they owed nothing to the new systems at all. There would be no bending of the knee to any other Kiithid. Together they founded a new Kith, and when the sun came up and the doors of Diamid opened, their elected new went in and seated himself as equal among equals. Nobody knew quite what to do. The new brought her own seat and took place within the Great Ark and announced herself as the new Hraal. The Diamid exploded into uproar, and the Sobani guards at first moved to remove the interlopers, though they stopped in their tracks when they looked upon their own Despite the bellows from the Baal and Siddim ranks, the calm, reasoned and oft-amused comments from Paktu, Somtaaw and Soban carried the day. Kith Hraal survived and was recognized as a legitimate Kith. Despite popular support, the Hraal suffered for years to come. Legal challenges to their existence came up time and again, arranged by the Siddim. Most problematically, they could not find a niche for their own society, since they had no reputation as a single unified Kith of one particular skill field. It seemed that within time the Siddim would get their way, though not by force, but by simple economics. One day, the forlorn Stel Hraal was touring in Nabal Iron Works, where Sachet technicians supervised a team of Nabal artisans, arguing over the best way to proceed the construction of a steam car. Seeing the two different Kiithid with such different cultural struggles to cooperate and communicate, the Hraal was struck by an inspiration. For there was one thing the Hraal had that nobody could rival, the urgent motivation to work together. Returning to the meager Hraal holdings, Stel Hraal convinced her Kith that she had glimpsed the future, and all it would need to come true was all the wealth they could muster to produce the steam cars under license. By the end of the next triad, the Tsars of Nabal and Sachet were invited to watch 40 Hraal workers spend a single day putting together 3 steam cars that would have taken the other Kith a month to make. The Hraal used their unique blend of disciplines to separate the complex mission of creating the steam car into a multitude of smaller tasks arrayed in an orderly pattern. Within the year, the Hraal had created an industrial revolution that lasts to this day. They started in a single humble shed and from there created the largest manufacturing yards on Kharak, encompassing thousands of workers cooperating to build everything from sandcrawlers to the largest command carriers. In 1012 KDS, the Hraal were struck by an ironic event. A significant part of their Kith had separated out and created a new Kiithid, Kith Lir Hra, whose combined holdings switched from desert-focused constructions to aerospace fabrication and orbital deployment, something that the current Hraal and his council still considered much too early. We come to Kith Somtaaw. The early days of the Sontar are mostly unknown, though they can trace their lineage back at least 1,000 years. They made their ancestral home in the Kontala mountain range, one of the most dramatic geographic features in Kharak's northern hemisphere. In the first 2 centuries of recorded history, the Somtaaw's holdings were rich and varied, and they were more than self-sufficient. In the year 178 KDS, various artists from throughout Kharak were gathered under the patronage of Tagur Somtaaw, one of the most enlightened Kiithid of his time. Employing the hundreds of masons, painters, architects, and weavers, the Somtaaw began building a series of 33 temples along the slopes of the mountain, called Lungajin, the roof of the world. The temples led from the sands of Kasar to the very summit of the highest mountain known at its time. The 33 temples were known as the Shimmering Path, and for 400 years it was considered the height of spiritual devotion for religiously inclined Kharakians to walk the path. Most Kharakians at the time attempted it at least once in their lifetime. The beginning was at the Oracle of Talar, the first temple, and the distance the pilgrim was able to travel from here on out was said to show the strength of faith burning within himself. The vast majority traveled up to the 7th temple, the Dome of Heaven, before calling the journey off. Those stubborn enough were allowed to move onward, up to the 33rd temple, in which the most sacred relic of the Somtaaw was stored, the famed star metal scrolls, which were written, allegedly, by the hands of Jakul himself in a language no living man could read. Since the later days of the Heresy Wars, Kith Somtaaw had largely abandoned their role as religious Kith, and by 1000 KDS most of their numbers were engaged in a profession the Sontar are known by today: mining. The transformation came by many years of privation and suffering. As the Heresy War rages, the Somtaaw could easily hold their own holdings along the defensible mountain range, though trade was cut off and Galcian and Siddim tried to seduce the Somtaaw to become a vassal. The Somtaaw refused time and again and held their own, though they were cut off from the rest of the world, since they had little resources others would want so badly as to fight off the Galcian or Siddim blocking the way. By 765 KDS, 31 of the 33 temples were closed to outsiders, with only the Oracle of Talar and the Dome of Heavens remaining open. In 789 KDS, Kura Somtaaw of the 30,000 remaining Kiithid woke from a strange dream. She had seen in her dreams Sajuk himself plunging a great red sword into the earth in the Kontala mountain range, in a seldom visited region far from the main roads. Driven by the urgency of her vision, she ordered several families to begin digging in the Red Creek Valley. Since Kura was descended from the temple woman of Talar, the Somtaaw reluctantly obeyed, and several Kiithid moved to the area to begin the excavations. What they found at Red Creek was the largest and richest iron ore deposit ever seen on Kharak, lying just 6 feet below the soft sediments. The Somtaaw were quick to announce their find, and both Siddim and Galcian offered ruinous sums to buy the mine. Kura Somtaaw's words were simple: "Why should I sell these madmen a knife to cut my throat with?" Instead, the Somtaaw built their own smelters and began mixing the iron with carbon, producing a very high quality steel, a commodity far more valuable than gold. A unique arrangement was made with the Sobani, whom saw an immediate use for the steel and superior weapons produced from it. In exchange for yearly tribute from the smelters of Hamon, the Sobani would agree to keep the pass open and free of marauders for 100 years. Following the Nabal intervention, the Somtaaw expanded their operations, throwing themselves into their new profession with customary Somtaaw enthusiasm. Though they haven't made significant technological advances of their own, they are quick to buy, copy, or steal new tools or technologies to apply for their own endeavors. Nowadays, they have holdings alongside the great industrial Kiithid like Nabal and Hraal. Kith Khaaneph. About the Khaaneph little information exists, for they walk where even the Galcian would not dare to go. They are the raiders of the storm and sand, and live far outside of any normality that even the Galcian would recognize. For decades and centuries, the loss of small villages and traveling groups was attributed to the deserts or the Galcian, but over time the coalition got to know the Galcian better, and in 1024 a cryptographer named Masar Manan brought a report before his superiors about a single word that he had recognized in broken Galcian codes, often used when the reports were about small raids. The superiors of Masar ignored the report and brushed it off at first, as the word was said to be just another one used to describe the coalition. Masar argued his point steadfastly. 500 out of 500 reports, he said, about confirmed Galcian coalition events used the word Fargan, the bound and the blind, which was used to describe the coalition. 150 other Galcian reports, with no correlation to known coalition action reports, instead used the word Khaaneph, which meant something entirely different altogether: godless. To the Kith Galcian, godless is barely comprehensible. It means to believe in nothing at all: no god, no law, no justice, no Kith. The Galcian believed the Khaaneph roamed the wastes where even they would not go, and strike at small family units and villages. Once the Galcian became aware that the coalition was investigating the Khaaneph issue, the Galcian Tsar arranged discreetly for some recordings to reach Masar's task force. Over 3 years of painstaking research, Masar was able to piece together a picture from the darkest fringes of Kharakian history. Not all whom were declared Grittidim by the Siddim had been assimilated or destroyed. Many struck out on their own. Most of those died, but some survived, even if barely. They did so by looting ruins left after battles, and later by preying on others like them. To be Khaaneph means to have no goals except for survival, and no belief past the need to remain alive, and no loyalty but to the self. The Khaaneph live on the empty space where other powers could not and did not go for hundreds of years. To them, every scrap of cloth and metal could be used to keep some machine working, every child stolen could be another warrior, every corpse was food and raw materials. At the edge of society, monsters have grown that even the Galcian must fear. And again, we are done for today with the lore series. I do thank you all for watching and hope you found this interesting. If you did, consider leaving a comment, a like, or even a subscription. You can also follow me on Twitter @_Matletter for all the news updates. With that said, I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.